I watched my mother pour something into my drink and then she smiled at me like nothing had happened. I have replayed that moment so many times since then. The way her hand moved so casually over my glass, the way she looked up, saw me watching, and didn't even flinch. Just smiled. That smile is what got me. Because my mother has always been good at smiling through things. Through my father leaving when I was 11, through the debt collectors calling the landline every other evening, through all the years she let me believe that if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, it would someday be enough for her. It never was. I should back up. My name is Nora and I am 31 years old. I work as a registered nurse at a hospital in Ottawa. I have been working there since I was 24, right after finishing my BSCN at the University of Ottawa. I took the job seriously from day one, picked up extra shifts, applied for every overtime opportunity I could find. Not because I loved grinding myself into the ground, but because my family needed money and I was the only one who seemed to understand what that actually meant. My mother has never worked full-time, not since my father left. She picked up occasional retail shifts here and there over the years, but nothing that lasted more than a few months. She always had a reason it didn't work out. The commute was too long, or the manager was impossible, or her back was bothering her again. I stopped questioning it by the time I was in my mid-20s. You just accept the reality in front of you. My brother, Ryan, is 3 years older than me. He lives 20 minutes away from my mother's house in Barrhaven with his wife Caitlin and their 2 kids. Ryan is not a bad person exactly. He is just someone who has always been very comfortable letting other people carry the weight. Growing up, he was the one my mother bragged about to her friends. He played hockey, he was funny and loud and the kind of guy everyone liked immediately. I was quieter. I got better grades. I worked after school. I saved money. My mother called me her little workhorse like it was a term of endearment, and I was old enough to smile at it, but young enough to not yet know how much it would cost me. When I was 26, my mother called me to tell me she was behind on her property taxes. She owed $11,000, and if she didn't pay it within 60 days, the city could begin proceedings against the house. I asked her why she hadn't mentioned it earlier. She said she didn't want to worry me. I asked her if she had talked to Ryan. She said Ryan had the kids and the mortgage, and she didn't want to put that on him. I paid it. I told myself it was a one-time thing. Over the next 4 years, it was not a one-time thing. There was the car that needed replacing after the transmission went. There was the dental surgery that her insurance didn't fully cover. There was the time the furnace broke in February, and I drove to Home Depot at 9 in the evening to pick up space heaters while we waited for the repair company. There were the grocery runs I did every 2 weeks when I visited, always ending up at the checkout with more in the cart than she had asked for, because I could see what was running low. There were the direct transfers that started showing up in my monthly budget as a recurring line item under family, sitting there between my RRSP contribution and my phone bill. Ryan came to Christmas every year. He brought wine and a nice dessert from the bakery in Nepean. My mother always told him how good the dessert was. She never asked him for money. Not once that I ever heard. I want to be fair here. I don't think she hated me. I think I had simply become, in her mind, the person who handled things. The reliable one. The one who would come through, no questions asked. There is a kind of love in that maybe, but it is not the kind that feels warm. It feels more like being trusted with a very heavy object and realizing too late that no one is planning to take it back. I had been saving for years to put a down payment on a condo. I had my eye on a 2-bedroom unit in Century Town, close to the hospital, reasonable square footage for the price. I had about $62,000 set aside. It wasn't enough yet for a comfortable down payment on what I wanted. But I was close. I had a meeting scheduled with a mortgage broker for early spring. In late January, I was invited to what my mother called a family dinner. Just the 4 of us, her, me, Ryan, and Caitlin. She said she wanted to do something special, that we hadn't all sat down together in a long time. Which was true. I should have paid more attention to why she was suddenly interested in that. I drove over on a Saturday evening. It was cold. One of those Ottawa winters that reminds you exactly where you live. The kind where the wind of the river finds every gap in your coat. My mother had made a roast, and the house smelled like it always did when she cooked. Rosemary and something slightly burnt. The oven running a little hot, like it always had. Ryan and Caitlin were already there when I arrived. They were in the living room, Ryan on his phone and Caitlin scrolling through something on a tablet. The kids were at her parents' place for the night. My mother was in the kitchen, cheerful in a way that I noticed but didn't think too much about. She was wearing a nice blouse. She'd done her hair. We sat down around 7. My mother had poured everyone a glass of red wine before we even came to the table, which she didn't usually do. She was normally more of a white wine person, and she usually let people pour their own. But the glasses were already on the table when we sat down, and nobody commented on it. We ate. We talked about Ryan's kids, about a dinner they were planning for their bathroom, about a show my mother had been watching. I talked about a long stretch of shifts I'd just finished. It was the kind of dinner where everything sounds normal and easy, and you don't realize until later that something else was happening underneath the whole thing. After the main course, my mother got up to get dessert. She had made squares, the kind she used to make at Christmas, with a chocolate layer on top. I got up too, telling her I'd help carry things in. But she waved me off and said she had it, so I stayed at the table. I was reaching for my wine glass when I glanced toward the kitchen. The door was open, and I had a direct line of sight to where my mother was standing with her back half turned. I saw her take something from the pocket of her apron, a small dark bottle, the kind you might see in a supplement aisle. I watched her lean over the glasses she'd set on the counter, and I watched her tilt that bottle over the one that was mine. I knew it was mine because it had a small chip on the rim that I'd noticed earlier and been meaning to mention. She tilted the bottle. Something went into my wine. I sat back down before she turned around. My heart was going very fast. She came in with the dessert plate a moment later, smiling, setting it in the middle of the table. She sat down. Everything continued like nothing had happened. I looked at my glass. I thought about what was in it. I thought about the fact that she had done this on purpose, with planning, with a bottle she had been carrying in her apron pocket. I thought about the fact that Ryan and Caitlin were sitting right there, oblivious, and that she had not put anything in their glasses. Only mine. There is a version of this where I stood up and said something, where I confronted her right there at the table in front of my brother, held up the glass and said what I had just seen. I thought about it. The idea moved through me like a current. Instead, I picked up my glass, made some small remark about the wine being nice, and then, as I set it back down, I nudged it just slightly, just enough, and it tipped toward Caitlin's side of the table. Not enough to spill much, just enough that Caitlin pulled her glass away, and in the shuffle I switched them. It was fast. Nobody was looking directly at me. Caitlin thought she'd knocked her own glass and laughed a little, and I handed her what had been mine and said sorry. That was my fault. She drank it. I know what you're thinking. I know exactly what you're thinking, because I have thought it too, every day since then. I could have done something different. I could have knocked the whole glass off the table. I could have made an excuse and poured it down the sink. I could have said I wasn't drinking tonight. There were other options. I know that. But in that moment, something in me went completely cold and flat. I had just watched my mother try to put something in my drink, and in that moment, the only thought in my head was, let her see what happens. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't thinking about Caitlin. I wasn't thinking clearly at all. I was operating on something below thought. Some animal thing that takes over when you realize the person who was supposed to protect you has been pointing a weapon at you. Caitlin got sick that night. Not immediately. We finished dessert, said our goodbyes, and she and Ryan drove home. She called Ryan's phone when they were 10 minutes away and said she felt dizzy and nauseous. By the time they got home, she couldn't stand up without the room spinning. Ryan took her to the Queen Ray Carlton Hospital. They kept her for observation overnight. By morning, she was okay, discharged with a note about a suspected adverse reaction to something she'd ingested. She was fine. I need to say that clearly. Caitlin was fine. She recovered completely. But I knew, and my mother knew, and for about 48 hours, neither of us said anything to the other. She called me on Monday morning. I let it ring. She called again that evening. I picked up. She started with, I think there was something wrong with the wine. I said, was there? There was a long pause, and then she said something I was not fully prepared for. She said she had a life insurance policy, that she had taken one out on me 3 years ago, with herself listed as the beneficiary. She said it like she was confessing, and I remember the specific way the silence felt after she stopped talking, like the temperature in the room had dropped, even though I was just standing in my own kitchen in Hintonburg with the kettle going. She said she had borrowed money from my aunt, and from someone Ryan knew, and that the amounts had compounded and she didn't know how to get out from under it. She said she had panicked. She said she was sorry. I did not say anything for a very long time. Then I said, "Does Ryan know about the policy?" She said he didn't. I said, "Does he know about the debt?" Another pause. "Some of it," she said. I hung up. I called a lawyer the next morning. Not a family lawyer. A real estate and estate lawyer. Someone who could tell me what my rights were and what, if anything, could be done about a life insurance policy taken out on an adult child without their knowledge. In Ontario, you cannot take out a life insurance policy on another adult without their knowledge and written consent. There are exceptions for spouses in certain dependent relationships, but an adult child with full legal capacity and no financial dependency does not fall into those categories. The policy, my lawyer told me, was almost certainly invalid. We requested documentation and began the process of contesting it. I also reported what had happened to Ottawa Police. I didn't go in with a dramatic story. I went in calmly, told them what I had seen, told them about the bottle in the apron pocket, told them about Caitlin's hospitalization. The officer I spoke to was thorough. They contacted the Queensway Garden to get Caitlin's records. They reached out to my mother. I don't know exactly what she told them, but I know the investigation took about 6 weeks, and at the end of it, she was charged. Charged with administering a noxious substance under Section 245 of the Criminal Code of Canada. It is a serious charge. The case is still working through the system as I write this, and I can't say too much more about it, but I can say that she has retained a lawyer and that Ryan now knows everything. My conversation with Ryan was the hardest one. He came over to my apartment one evening in March, and he sat at my kitchen table, and I watched his face go through about 6 different things in the space of an hour. He didn't defend her. He didn't offend her. He didn't try to tell me I had misunderstood. He just sat there and eventually said, "I didn't know it had gotten this bad." I told him I believed him. We are not close the way siblings on television are close, but we are talking. That is something. I also called my aunt separately and had a conversation about the money my mother had borrowed from her. My aunt was horrified when she heard what had happened. She said she had lent the money in good faith, that she had no idea what it was for. I believe her too. Caitlin, for her part, has been quiet with me. I think she is processing things in her own way. I don't blame her for that. Ryan told me recently that she's been going to therapy. I hope it helps. As for me, I took the $62,000 I had saved, and last October I put a down payment on a 2-bedroom condo on Gladstone Avenue, 5 minutes from work. I got the keys on a Thursday afternoon, and I drove there after my shift, and I stood in the empty main room for a while without turning on the lights, just standing in the quiet. It smelled like fresh paint and dry air. No rosemary, no burnt oven smell, no weight of anyone else's needs pressing in from every corner. I thought about all the years I had spent transferring money to her account, driving over to fix things, filling her cart at the grocery store, absorbing every quiet request she made, because I had been trained from childhood to believe that taking care of her was just what I did. That was my role in the family. I thought about how I had never asked why Ryan didn't carry the same weight. I had never even asked myself that question out loud. I ask it now. I ask it every time I sit in my own space, in a silence I paid for, in a life that is finally starting to resemble something I chose rather than something I was handed. People have asked me if I regret not intervening faster that night at dinner. If I regret what I let happen to Caitlin, I don't have a clean answer. I think about it more than I let on. What I know is that Caitlin is okay, and that if I had picked up that glass and said nothing, if I had gone home and processed it privately and called my mother the next day to confront her quietly, nothing would have happened. The policy would still be active. She would have found another way. I would have continued to exist in a family system that had, for my entire adult life, been quietly positioned against me. I don't think what I did was good. I think it was the thing that finally broke the structure. There is a difference between those two things, and I have spent a lot of time sitting with it. What I know for certain is this. I am no longer anyone's workhorse. I am no longer a line item in someone else's survival plan. The money I earn now stays where I put it. The condo I own now has my name on it and only my name. The door locks when I want it to, and when I wake up in the morning in a home that is mine, I feel something I don't quite have a word for yet. It is quiet and it is mine. And for now, that is everything. There is a thing that happens when you finally stop pretending a situation is manageable. Something unlocks. Not in a dramatic way, not like in movies where there is a single moment of clarity and everything after is clean. It is quieter than that. It is more like setting down a bag you have been carrying for so long you forgot it was heavy. I spent years being the responsible one. I told myself that was just who I was, that some people are built for reliability and others aren't. But the truth I had to sit with after everything that happened is that I had never actually chosen that role. It had been assigned to me before I was old enough to question it, and I had accepted it because accepting it felt like love, and questioning it felt like betrayal. What my mother did at that dinner table was not a sudden thing. It was the end of a long pattern. Every time I transferred money without being asked, every time I drove over in the cold to fix something Ryan never heard about, every time I smiled through the feeling that my contributions were expected and his were celebrated. Those moments added up to something, and that something eventually produced a small dark bottle in an apron pocket. Actions have weight. They accumulate. The way we treat people over years builds a kind of architecture, and eventually that architecture either holds something good or it collapses under what it was actually built on. I have thought a lot about the choice I made that night, the one I am not proud of, the one I have not tried to excuse away. I know that letting Caitlin drink that glass was not a righteous act. What I know is that I was operating from a place of complete moral exhaustion. The kind that sets in when you have spent years being reasonable inside a situation that wasn't. I don't get to claim the high ground there. What I can say is that clarity, real clarity, the kind that lets you see a situation without the fog of hope and obligation, is something I had to earn the hard way. The intelligence I needed wasn't just knowing what was in the glass. It was finally understanding after 31 years what the whole structure of my family had actually been built to do to me. There is something that takes real backbone about choosing yourself when every system around you has been designed to make that feel selfish. I filed the police report. I called a lawyer. I contested the insurance policy. I did not do any of that in anger exactly. I did it because it needed to be done, because I had finally decided that my life was worth defending with the same energy I had spent defending everyone else's. I think about Nora, about myself, standing in that empty condo on Gladstone on a Thursday evening in October. No noise, no requests, just paint smell and quiet. That moment cost me something real. It cost me the version of family I had spent my whole life trying to earn. But what I got in exchange was the one thing I had never actually had, a life that was built around what I needed, not what I was willing to sacrifice. That is not a small thing. That is everything.